Hi everyone, this is Angie at Little Darlings Rubber Stamps. Today I'm going to do a tutorial for you, and I'm going to be working with this image from our CandiBean collection. This is Izzy's Stroll. I made this card a little while back and I had quite a few requests actually on how I colored her, so I thought I would do a little tutorial today to show you exactly what I did. Let me move this out of the way. First of all, if you're not familiar with our stamps, this is how they would arrive packaged when you get them in your home. I have already gone ahead and stamped this image. She's on watercolor paper, and I've stamped her with StazOn in black. And if you're familiar with StazOn, you do need to leave it a little bit of time to dry before you start working with it. But we should be good to go by now, so I'm going to get started. First of all, I'm working with the Tim Holtz markers today. I'm going to start on her hair, and I'm actually going to be starting, if I can flip this around, with antique linen and walnut stain. When I work on hair, first of all with the markers, I'm going to start and I'm going to do this without water. So I'm going to get some of my lines in here, because hair is, there's a lot of strands in the hair, and they're really, I want to have that show. These markers are really great. I'm using the fine tip, and I'm just very gently starting with my antique linen, adding a little bit of color into this image. Okay, so I'm just going to go kind of quickly here. I tend to move my image around when I color to help make sure that I get the strokes in the right direction. I'm just adding a little bit. I'm not going to use water actually on her hair to blend this out, because I want to make sure I leave the coloring, or I'm sorry, the strands, the lines. So I'm very carefully going back over, kind of a second coat here, if you will, just to kind of deepen it and darken it in the areas where you would expect it to be shadowed. Now this image, she's walking outside. So we kind of have to imagine, when you're outside and the sun is shining on you, you've kind of got light coming from all around. There's going to be one strongest point in the direction of the sun. Okay, so we kind of have to think about where the light source is going to be in this image. Because it's the sun, it's going to be coming from above, so I'm going to kind of imagine that the sun is coming down from this direction a little bit. Okay, now I'm switching over to my walnut stain. Now you want to be very careful with this, because the walnut stain is much darker, and you don't want this to be too strong. So I'm only going to be adding a few strands in here to start off with. And I'm flicking very short strokes. Now where the hair tucks into the braids here, I'm going to follow some of these lines a little bit, but the darkest point is going to be where the hair tucks in to that braid. So it's this little point down here. We're also going to have a little bit of a shadow coming from where the two twists of the hair meet. You got to remember, this is a braid, so it's twisted. So it's going to be a little bit dark in this area and up in here. It's going to be hidden from the light a bit. And I'm thinking about where the artist has already given me some of these lines for the hair to show me the contour, and I'm just going over those gently as well. Turn your image as you're working. You don't want to be twisting and turning your body. If you try and do that, it's going to be very uncomfortable. You're not going to get very good lines when you color. And I'm going to make sure as I'm doing this that I'm following the lines that the artist has given me. Okay, because she's already told me, with the lines that she's given, she's already told me the direction that the hair is moving. Okay, I'm going to come down to this final bit at the bottom. And a little bit, I'm just dotting around at the top there too, because sometimes I don't want a real strong line. Okay, so now we've given that a little bit of contour. I'm going to come back with my antique linen, because right now I've got those areas that look really dark and I don't see very much of that antique linen anymore. And she does have blonde hair. Okay, I'm going to go along and just add a little more definition to the shadow up underneath. But as I do this now with my antique linen, I'm actually going to, it's going to kind of lighten what I've done with the walnut stain. I don't like to leave a lot of white when I'm working with hair. If you look around you and you look at, maybe the people in your family, the people in your household, and you look at how the light is hitting their hair. You do see light and dark. You're going to see natural, color changes in there, but you're not going to see white. Even if you have somebody in your family who has black hair, when the light hits it, you don't see white. So it's not very natural. I'd like to try and do things that are a little more natural. Okay, so there's her braid. I'm going to come in with my walnut stain just a little bit more up at the top here. And I'm just going to dot in just to strengthen that shadow there a little bit. And in each of these areas where the hair twists from one point to another, just to kind of strengthen that a bit. Okay, so when I went over the walnut stain with the antique linen, it softened the walnut stain a bit. So right now I'm just going into just kind of enhance that contrast in the shadow a bit. Okay, so there is her hair, her braid. Now we're going to move on to her skin a little bit, and we're going to start working with water. So now I've got my tattered rose. When I work with skin, I typically work with tattered rose, and I will work with the tea dye as well. But I'm going to start with my tattered rose, and I'm going to work with the fatter brush tip of this. And all I'm going to do with this marker is add a little bit of color along the edge of her face. And I'm going to take my brush, I've dipped it in a very tiny bit of water, and I'm going to move that color around with the water. I'm brushing in one direction, so I'm pulling the color down. Now you got to remember this paper is only going to accept so much water, so I don't want to do too much at one time, but I do want to work this edge just a little bit. And you got to remember with watercolors too, we're going to go back and we're going to relayer. So right now it might get a little bit washed out, but I have to let that dry. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. I'm actually going to move on to her hat at this point while the face dries. And the hat, if you remembered from the picture that I showed you, was red. And when I work with red, I work with a lot of different reds to achieve the colors that I want. So I'm going to work with Festive Berries, Barn Door, and Fired Brick. And I'm going to go light to dark. So I'm going to start with my Festive Berries. And I'm going to start up in the corner here and just bring a little bit in. Remember, we're working with red. This is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Red is difficult, and black can be difficult as well. But I'm just going to bring a little bit of color, and I'm going to work in small areas. I'm going to get my brush dipped in a little bit of water, and look how that moves. Isn't that beautiful? It's just so gorgeous the way this color moves across this page. You want to be very careful with this red, because if you get this into an area where you don't want it, you're kind of stuck with it, unless you're going to be going over it with something even darker to wash it out a bit, or to cover it, I should say. Red is not an easy color to get rid of. Okay, so I'm going to turn this around. I do a lot of turning when I'm working with my images. Little areas at a time. And I'm just going to pull this color with my brush, a little bit of water on my brush. Notice the size of my brush. It's very, very small. It's not going to hold too much water, and it's going to offer the control that I need. And if this is looking a little orange to you, a little orangey as we work, we want to keep in mind that I'm going to be changing this color up a bit when I start adding the other shades to it. So you have to kind of, you're going to be practicing with this a bit. You're going to be working with these colors, blending them together, and seeing what you get. I always put my cap, if you notice, I always put that cap right back on when I'm done working with it, because I don't want to drop that marker and get the ink everywhere. That would be a mess now, wouldn't it? Very gently going to pull this color around. Sorry, I keep moving this picture all around, but I got to make sure I'm at the right angle as I work. It's going to get really light and faint up here, and that's what I want as I bring these together. I want to make sure I've got my areas shaded properly, even from the very beginning. So I'm going to keep this very, very light. Okay. Is it blended together perfectly right now? Absolutely not. Am I worried about it? Absolutely not. Okay. I'm going to let that area dry. And I'm now going to add some color to the top of the hat. And notice I've changed directions. And I'm now going up with my strokes. And that's because the artist has told me what direction the contour of the hat is going in. She's already shown me with the lines that she's drawn how she wants this to curve. Okay. I'm still working with my Festive Berries marker, and I'm pulling this color up with a little bit of water. This is just going to create the base of what I need to do. And again, I know it looks really bright right now. So now I've turned this around and I'm going to pull this. Remember, the light is coming from the top part of this picture because the sun is up above. So I'm going to leave that area lighter. And yes, I know this is a slow process. This video is going to take a little while, so I hope you're comfortable. All right, now we need to let that dry. All right, so we've kind of, at this point, defined where the light is coming from. We've got the lighter area in here that's going to be hit. Up around here, it's going to be tucked. Let me point better maybe with this side. This is going to be tucked up underneath, so I'm going to have a little shadowed area here. It's going to be brighter as the light hits from the top here, and as it curves on down, it's going to be darker in this area. Same with right around here. We're going to have a little bit of shadow. As we go out to the edge, it's going to be brighter. Okay? I'm going to leave that area right now. And let me see if her face is still, her face is pretty dry right now. So I'm going to go back in with a little bit more of my tattered rose and just define that a little more. And then I'm going to pull out those edges to bring some of the color down into the rest of her face, leaving some of that shadow up in the top there. So it's a little bit darker where her skin is going to be hidden a bit from the hat. So we've got her a little bit of shadow there. And I've pulled the rest of the color down around her cheek. I'm going to leave that at this point, and I'm going to move on to a completely different area. I've decided that I want to have a white t-shirt on her. So now I've got my pumice stone. Move that a little bit for you. And so she's going to have a white t-shirt. I'm going to come in with some pumice stone. The pumice stone gives me a really nice light gray, which I like a lot. It's one of my favorite colors to work with. And I'm just going to pull some lines in here, offering a little bit of shadowing. Because even though her shirt is white, there's going to be a little bit of color to it. I'm going to pull some of this color underneath her arm, down around the outside, because this t-shirt has got this kind of poofy sleeve on it, and I just want to add a little bit of dimension to it. Okay, so I'm going to grab a little bit of water on my brush and just kind of soften that up a little bit. I don't want to pull that all the way through because I don't want her shirt to end up gray. Okay, so I just want to soften this color that I've added a tiny little bit. Notice I keep squeezing the tip of that brush a little bit. It's because I want to get some of the water off of it. And down below here, soften some of that so it just looks shaded a bit or shadowed instead of gray. Okay? Very simple. So that is her t-shirt. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit more with this line underneath the arm. There we go. I'm going to go back to my tattered rose, and I'm going to do some color on her skin just a bit. I use the thinner tip of this marker when I want to get into the tighter areas. All right, so I'm just adding a little bit there. And now I've got some water on my brush. I'm going to pull some of that color up through her arm, so she doesn't have a very white arm. This is a first layer, remember? Tiny little bit more there. Pull that color across, and I'm going to leave it at this point. All right, let's see how her hat is doing. Feels pretty dry to me. I'm going to move over now to Barn Door. That's going to give me a little bit of a different color. I'm going to go right over the top of the festive berries on her hat, and I'm going to change this color a little bit. We're going to start going a little bit deeper with the red. I'm using the brush tip. And now I'm coming in with some water to move that color around. Again, I'm using a very fine tip brush because I want to be able to move that color very precisely. And I don't want to have too much water on my brush. Move that color around. Okay, notice it's gone from looking a little pink to getting a little more of a deeper red. I'm not a big fan, by the way, of the orangey kind of reds. I like a really good deep red. pull this through with some water. If it starts feeling like you don't have a lot of water on that brush, if the paint stops moving, get a little more water. Okay, I'm going to bring a very, very light coat over that rim where I want to keep it light. All right. Now, flip this around. Sorry if I'm moving too fast. I'm going to come over to the top of the hat. Now I'm putting my strokes in the same direction that I did before, but I'm not going up as far. I'm also going to come in with my fine tip, and I'm going to take a look at these lines that the artist has given me, and I'm going to give a little bit of attention to those. Take a look at this little dip in her hat. Okay, give a little definition to that. I'm going to pay attention now to these other lines that the artist has given me. Okay. Come in with a little bit of water, move that color up. You don't want to blend out too much these lines. Okay, give a little bit of attention up top here. I want to bring some of that red up. Pay attention to the lines, the edges. I don't think I have enough color on this side, so I'm going to pull a little bit more in and pull it up through. Get rid of some of that water, and now move it over. Now that pink color has disappeared. Okay, so the hat is starting to come along, starting to look a little more in the deeper red that I like. I'm going to add a little bit of color now. I'm going to go back to my festive berries. You have to think about what are some of the other things on this picture that are going to have some of the same colors that we've already used. And this ribbon or this band around her hair is going to have the same red. So I start with my festive berry because I want to layer the color exactly the same as I did on her hat so that I get the same look to the color. Add a little bit of water, blend that out just a little bit, and I'm going to leave it at this point. All right. I'm going to move back to her face and her arm a little bit. And right now I've got my tea dye. And I'm going to just deepen up the shadow underneath her hat with the tea dye a little bit. Just a very, very little bit. Strengthen that line, that shadow I should say. And I'm going to pull that color just very, very gently with a little bit of water, just to soften the edge of that line. All right. And now I've got some tea dye that I want to pull into her arm a bit as well, and her hand, just a little bit underneath this arm here where we've got that shadow, where it kind of contours around. Tiny little bit of water. Pull that up, soften that edge a bit. Pull that color up through the rest of her arm, just a tinge. Okay, and I'm going to leave it to dry at this point. Let's move on now to a completely different color combination. I'm going to work with her overalls a bit. And one of my favorite blues to work with is Weathered Wood. So I'm going to start with this on her jeans, or on her overalls a bit. Oops, wrong end. I'm going to go to the fine tip here and just add a little bit on this strap. Bring a little bit around the edge here just to kind of define where I'm going with it. And notice whenever I put this marker down, I'm always starting with the color where I want it to be the deepest or the darkest. Because as I pull away from it with my water brush, I'm actually going to be lightening the color as it pulls it out and around. Okay, let's give a little bit of definition in here to these pants. And at this point, I'm going to tuck up underneath and around where her jeans are. Now I'm not going to be pulling this color all the way through and across, so right now I'm focusing just on kind of outlining it a bit and getting started with my color. So don't worry about it and say, oh my goodness, how is that color going to come all the way through? Right now I'm just providing the initial definition of color. It's not much different than when you're working with some of your markers where, like maybe your alcohol ink markers, where you're starting and kind of defining where your shadows are going to be. It's kind of the same thing that I'm doing here. All right, so I've kind of outlined that just a little bit with my weathered wood, and now I'm going to go in and pull the color across and just soften it a tiny bit and blend it out. This is so beautiful. I just love the look that I get with these distress inks. It's just such a beautiful, soft, and kind of old-fashioned or antique kind of a look that you get with this, with these markers. I absolutely love the colors that they've chosen with these as well. You know, there's so many, I don't know how many different blues there are, maybe 4, 5, 6 different blues, and they're all so very unique. But they all have such a beautiful aged kind of quality to them. I just love them. You know, and you can do the same kind of thing if you're working, if you don't have the markers, the distress ink markers. You can do the same thing with the ink pads, with the refillers. You just want to stamp, if you're using the ink pads, for example, you just want to stamp on something like maybe a wax paper or just really a non-porous surface. I mean, for goodness sakes, I've actually stamped on, this is going to sound a little bit silly, but I've actually stamped on the plastic bag packaging that my stamps come in. If I didn't have anything else handy right there, and I wanted to enhance maybe one of the images that I've already worked with, sometimes I'll just grab that bag and I'll stamp right on it, and it works perfectly. It's just beautiful. So I'm going to let that dry at this point, and I'm going to move on right now actually to these shoes of hers. She's got these little tennis shoes that I kind of want to keep white. So I'm going back in with my pumice stone. You know, whenever I want to do something that's white, I grab my pumice stone, because pumice stone is going to make something look shadowed. So it's a great way to add a little depth when you want something to look white. It's probably my favorite go-to color for shadowing. So I'm just going to pull this color a tiny bit through. I still want these to look white. You got to remember these are tennis shoes. They're going to be a little grungy, a little bit dirty. So I'm just pulling this color up and around just to soften the edges of where I put it, and I'm going to let that dry. I'm just going to let that set. That's all I'm going to do on that at this moment. So right now, I'm going to go back. I'm looking at her hand, her arm, and I want to add a little more of this tattered rose because her arm is looking a little too pale to me. So I just want to pull some tattered rows across it, just a little bit. Okay. Let's move back to that hat. It still looks a little bright. Not that I'm against bright, but it's not quite the color that I want. I'm grabbing my fired brick. This one is my absolute favorite red, but be very careful. This is a very deep and rich color. I love it. I'm using my brush. Be very careful when you're working with that brush. Actually, I'm going to switch as I go to these lines. I'm going to switch over to the other tip. And I'm just going to enhance these curves that the artist has given me. And I'm going to come in and deepen these areas where the color has, or the shadows are going to be darker, I should say. Right up in there. Oops. Now let's move on to our water. A little bit of water on my brush. A little bit more. I'm going to pull this through. I don't want to work this too much because I want it to stay dark and rich. Okay. But I do want to pull it all the way across all of the areas because I don't want it to end up looking pink or orange. I want it to be a very rich and deep, deep red. I guess you could call it kind of a blood red. Or, well, you could go with the actual description of the color and call it brick red. How about that? Ha ha. Sorry. Alright, let's add a little bit more into here. There we go. You want to be careful that you don't add additional color over to a really wet area, because you can actually make your paper pill a bit that way. So now I'm going to go up and just kind of strengthen some of these areas up in the cap, I guess you could call it, of the hat. Define this area right in here. And now I'm going to pull up with the color. I'm going to go back to the brush, pull that color in. Alright. And now I'm going to again pay attention to the contour. And now I'm going to very gently pull this color up and through it. A little bit of water on my brush. Everything starts looking much richer as I move the brick red color over. Pull it all the way around. Just soften that a tiny little bit. A little edge here that I'm not happy with, so I'm going to pull that color up and just soften that edge a little. There we go. Loving the hat. It's looking really great. So I'm going to grab my brick red again, and I'm going to pay some attention once again to this little wrap that's around her hair. And the artist has given us a couple of lines in there to show us where the tucks are. And those little tucks are where I want to put my deepest color, and then I blend it out right into the center. Okay, it's coming along. I'm going to go back to her overalls at this point. I've got my weathered wood. Now I'm going to start pulling a little more color in. I'm working with my brush tip a bit. And I'm going to start moving that color in. Okay, I've got a small area way up in here. I still want to get in with the finer point of it. But I'm going to start moving this color in and around. Okay, I'm working with the brush tip, so now I'm pulling more color off of that brush tip. And notice I don't do real straight lines. I kind of make the lines a little bit jagged. That helps me to avoid edges with the color when I'm, so it kind of helps you to blend out the edges a bit. Ooh, shoot, I got a little bit of red on my brush still. Yikes. Let's blend that out. That's okay. If you end up getting a color in there that you didn't want, blend it out with water. It'll lighten it. And then just go over it with the color that you wanted once it dries, once that area dries again. You won't even see it. Just be very careful. I'm going to pull this color up. Goodness gracious, I can't seem to get rid of this red. Just did it again, yikes. There we go. Fortunately, we're still working with the very beginning of the blue. I'm not too worried because I'm going to be darkening that denim even more as we go. There we go, pull that out, a little more water. There we go. Pulling that color across. All right, right now I've got a lot of water in those overalls, so I'm going to step aside from those and let that dry. You see how her hat is doing? Okay, the red on the hat is dry. So now I'm going to take my weathered wood. I want this, the band on the hat, actually I'm going to go back to my tip here, to be very similar in color. I want it to match what her overalls look like. So I've got my weathered wood, and I'm bringing some color in here. And folks, I want you to be very careful here when you start to blend this, because you do not want to bring the red from that hat into this band on her hat. So let me get a little bit of water here on my brush. Make sure you have a very, very fine brush tip that you're working with. I don't want to go into that red. I can very easily mess this up. There we go. I'm not going all the way to the edge. All right. Let that dry. Overalls are still a little bit wet. So let's go to a completely different area. And I've got a couple of yellows here. I'm going to move on to the flowers a little bit while everything else dries. I'm going to go to the fine tip, and I'm going to put some yellow on these flowers. Now I'm putting the color right in the base of each of these petals. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Just putting it in the base because that's where the color is going to be the darkest, because that's where it's going to be shadowed. All right? And now I'm just going to blend that out a bit with some water. Very easily. All right. Let's go to the flowers that are in this basket. Do the same thing. Okay, just right in there, the base of each flower. This is kind of just a starting point with these. Base of each petal. And if it looks like I'm scribbling, it's because I am. It's very, very simple. I think these markers are actually, it's much easier to work with these markers than with the re-inkers or with the pads, but the only thing I find is that it's harder to create my own colors when I'm using them. If I'm working with the inkers, the re-inkers, or the pads, I can kind of blend off of the page, so to speak. I can blend a couple of colors together. Now I could still do that with these. If I wanted to color off on, let's say, the wax, like a wax paper or something, I can still blend the colors, but it's I think it works a little bit better when I'm working with the re-inkers or the pads. Now I'm doing a little bit more yellow, and I'm working with a brush tip. So this is kind of a second coat, just to deepen it. Because I didn't put too much water on these flowers to begin with when I was blending, it's really okay to add it kind of quickly. And now I'm going to move that color around again. Just a little bit to spread it throughout the petals. I leave a little bit of white on these, on the tips of each petal. Just spread that color around a bit. Now I'm going to let that dry at this point. Let's see how we're doing up here. I'm going to come back in now, add a little more blue in here. So I want to bring some of that color across. This is my weathered wood, same as before. Very, very careful not to get near that red. There we go. A little more blue deep in there. There we go. Blend that out a little bit. All right. And zoom in a little bit there. There we go. Now I'm going to come back into these pants and pull some color across them again. When you're working with these, with the watercoloring, it's all about layering and layering and layering. Okay, so now I'm blending from the edge of the color. I'm not going all the way out to the end. So I want this color to come across. Just moving that out a little bit. Soften the edge. Get this beautiful blue. Oh, I love this weathered wood. Somebody asked me, what is your favorite distress ink color? It would have to be weathered wood. I just think it's so beautiful. It's kind of a country blue, but without being, I don't know, without being too country, I guess. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful color. I think it's so gorgeous on denim. It's even gorgeous, I mean, actually, if you wanted to do furniture with it, not real furniture, but furniture with, you know, within your coloring, I should say. There we go. All right, so there's her blue. So far, I'm really happy with this. Okay, now I've got, what is this color called? Spiced Marmalade. A little bit of an orange to it. I'm going to bring that in to the center of the flowers just to kind of outline those lines a little bit that are in the center, and then also to add a little bit of an oranginess to the very, very center of the flower. Very little of this. And I'm going to very quickly go around to each of these flowers and do that. A tiny little bit right around the center. And again, if it looks like I'm scribbling, it's because I kind of am. A little bit right in that little circle of the center there. Oops, almost missed one. There we go. And it looks pretty orange right now, so I'm going to soften that. A little bit of water in between each. There we go. Move that color around, spread it out. There we go. We're kind of losing some of the yellow, if you'll notice, on the flowers. So we will be going back over that again once this dries. Okay, there we go. Flowers are starting to come along. I'm going to go back to this hat now. I like to age it up a bit. I've got my pumice stone, and I'm just going to be going over the darkest areas with this pumice stone a little bit. It's just going to deepen up some of those shadows a bit. I'm going to work with both my brush tip as well as the fine tip. Coming right over some of the areas of this band around the hat as well. Accentuate these lines on the hat. This adds a little bit of age to everything that we've done. Okay. There we go. I'm going to come in with a little bit more blue on here. And then I'm going to hit it with some water, just a tiny little bit. There we go. I don't really want to blend out all that pumice stone either, so I'm just doing a tiny little bit of water. Again, just a couple of strokes over it. It's just going to soften the edge a little bit without blending everything out. Okay, there we go. That's looking good. I'm very happy with it. I'm going to go back to the flowers, and I'm going to bring some of that yellow back in, right into the center area of each of these flowers. If they're not looking fantastic yet, don't worry about it. We still have shading to do on those as well. It all comes together in the end. we go. All right. Very happy with that. I'm going to come in with my pumice stone now, right over some of these areas in the jeans, or in the overalls. Just want to deepen some of these areas. See what I mean about this pumice stone being so fantastic? I love this. Isn't that beautiful? It's so gorgeous. Just strengthening some of these darker areas, shadows. And a little bit of a, kind of lends a little bit of a, I don't know, kind of a worn and maybe a little bit of a dirty look to it. You know, like she's been digging out in the field, you know, to pick these flowers, and she's gotten a little bit messed up doing it. It's all little kids will do when they're playing outside. There we go. There. Okay, a little bit of water, just go over that and soften some of those edges a little bit. There we go. Just strengthen some of the areas on the shoes a bit too. You know, you'll find as you start coloring areas around some of these things you've already worked on, suddenly the work you've done earlier might not look strong enough, so you might add a little bit to it. And that's what I'm doing with the shoes. So her shoes are still white, but just kind of strengthening up those shadows that I added there. There we go. All right. Now I'm going to move on to the green. Oops, wrong side. The green and the leaves. This one is Shabby Shutters. My favorite green to start with when I'm working with leaves. I need to kind of go through and figure out which areas in here are leaves. Kind of hard to tell sometimes when you stamp some of the images. There's so many lines. Gotta kind of take a step back sometimes and think about what's what. Go right up the stem, a little bit into these leaves. This little puppy over here is holding one too. I'm going to kind of come in and give this grass here a little bit of color to get started. A little bit of water just to move that green around down the leaf. Very, very light so far. We're jumping off point with the green. All right. Now, while that dries, I'm going to move on to the basket and the puppy. And I've got antique linen. Again, it's my favorite color to start with whenever I'm going to be doing anything that has a brown or a beige base to it. So I'm going to be coming in with some color into this basket. And I'm just kind of working kind of free with it and kind of defining where the shadows are going to be. You know, tucked up underneath some things. Come back over it again with a second coat where the darker areas are going to be. some of the weaves that the artist has given us. And now go in with a tiny little bit of water just to soften that. And move that kind of beige color around. Such a pretty color. I'm going to go on this little puppy here too, still with antique linen. Come around, get a little bit of color on the ears, a little bit on that little face there. Each of those legs, just a tiny little bit. How about the little slope of his back right there? Oops, almost forgot that little foot. And now just a little bit of water to move that color across that puppy. Gives me a really good starting point. Okay? Tiny bit of color on that puppy. Okay, now while the basket and the puppy dry, I'm going to grab my pumice stone. It is my favorite marker, I'll tell you. And now I'm going to add a little bit more dimension to the center of these flowers. Kind of going around with each of the individual folds or tucks. All right. Just defining how it's moving. When I say that, I just realized kind of what that sounds like. No, I don't think it's actually moving. But there is some life to it. There is shape to it, and I just want to enhance that shape. I also want to grab this spice marmalade again and get a little more orange right in the center here. And I don't think I'm going to blend that out, and I'm not going to be blending out the pumice stone that I put in the center of these either, because if I do that, I'm going to end up with a real strong blob of gray, and it's not going to look good. So I'm just kind of defining these flowers a little bit better with my pumice stone. Kind of the separation of them, making sure that they have their own shape. It's going to make them pop right off of this page. And then I'm also going to come in with the spice marmalade and define the orange center just a little bit more. I'm not coloring the whole center orange, just a little bit, just to brighten it, sharpen it. Make sure that you see it. Okay. Now I'm going to touch in a little bit of yellow on each of those just to brighten up the yellow. There we go. Okay. Now let's pay attention to that basket again. Got my brush tip now, going in with a second coat of my antique linen on that basket. A little bit more on the puppy. Oh my goodness, I look at this little puppy and I think about my puppy. Oh, my puppy is now 12 years old. How does that happen so fast? Oh my goodness. A little bit of water just to blend that out. Okay, and I see very suddenly another little flower in there. I don't think I ever saw that one. Get some yellow in here too. There we go. And I'm not going to blend that out because it is so small, it would just disappear. All right. I'm going to go back to my shabby shutters, my green, on these leaves, and I'm going to introduce a second coat of the green. Just to darken that a little bit. All right. Tiny little bit of water, just a dab. All right. And as you can see, the leaves are not popping out just yet. But they will. We're not done. A little bit. Actually, let me do the other side. Still shabby shutters. Let's get a little bit of green on here. A little bit of water. Move that color around. All right. And, whoops. Want the other tip right down there. There we go. Almost forgot the stem on that one. I'm going to grab my tea stain, or tea dye I should say right now, and I'm going to come in on this basket and start adding a little more of a brown. Okay, so it's going to go from beige to being more brown. And this, by the addition of this color, it's going to start making those flowers kind of stand out a little bit more. But you can't start with this color because you have to have that beige kind of base in there, because there's going to be some areas, excuse me, there's going to be some areas that are going to be lighter, and you want to make sure you have that beige in the background. That's what that antique linen is for. Okay. I'm actually going to add some of this color to this little puppy. Okay, up in the ears. I'm kind of going over the same areas that I did before. I don't want to add too much color to him because he's so small. You know, the lines on him are so small, and I don't want to lose the look of him. But I do want to kind of suggest that he is brown. Super cute. I just love him. He's so adorable. Now I'm going to grab a color called Brushed Corduroy. I want to get some of this in here, just in some of the deeper, darker areas of this basket. All right. Move that around, but it's going to keep some of the real rich brown. That brushed corduroy is so gorgeous. Pay a little more attention now to these leaves, and I've got a color here called Peeled Paint. So pretty. Such a gorgeous green. I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of green on each of these leaves. Just love this. Ooh, so pretty. All right. Just do kind of a couple little strands in here. Little blades of grass, I guess. Move that around. I'm not doing a whole lot of water on this green because I don't want it to blend all the way across. I want to keep it sharp and strong. So So just maybe one little brush or two with the water, and very little water on that brush. Okay. This will just soften what I've put down on the paper. Just a little. All right. I think we're pretty good. What do you think? How about if we go in with a little bit of shadowing at this point? I'm going to grab my weathered wood, my pumice stone, and I'm going to pull another color into the mix. And I think I'm going to go with, sorry, I'm choosing a color right now, Stormy Sky. All right. Right now the image is painted, but it looks a little flat on the page. Here is where I go in and I'm going to add a little bit of dimension. I've got my weathered wood, and I'm just going to add a little bit of color real close to the image. A lot of water on my brush, and I'm going to move that out around her. A lot of water on the brush. All right. Weathered wood. All right. Be careful with this. Do not come right up to the image. I do not want to pull that red into this. Remember, I don't want to pull all the colors from her hair out into this. All right. This is where you got to be very careful. Float that color with the water. Just float it out. Weathered wood still. Weathered wood is my favorite color to start this with. Notice I'm not doing a harsh line. I'm doing kind of a nice jagged edge. When you have an edge like that, it's much easier to blend it out. If you have a real strong flat line, it's going to be harder to get rid of the edge of it. And I don't want that. Okay. All right. A lot of water on my brush. But I'm not putting that brush up against that red. I don't want that red in the edges here, or out in the surrounding area. I'm going to turn this image around because I'm right-handed. I want to make sure that I don't mess this up and get that red into this. A lot of water on my brush. When you see me pull the brush away, I'm dipping in more water. There we go. So pretty. This is going to give the suggestion that she's got, you know, the nice blue sky in the background. All right. I'm going to pull this out and around that puppy, around that flower. A lot of water. Just float that color out. Okay, so it all blends into white. All the edges kind of disappear a bit. I'm going to make this a little bit darker in here. There we go. Very pretty. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, I love this. All right. Come in here a little bit more. Okay. Am I scribbling? Oh yeah, I'm scribbling. Scribbling and will give you the best blend out of your edges. You're probably wondering at this point, what's she going to do with those other colors? And you forgot about those. No, I did not. Did not forget about them. I just haven't gotten to them yet. Okay. There we go. Blend out these lines a little bit. A couple of little scribbles. Blend them out. Just so that color extends a bit. Okay? Oh, I just noticed something. How did I forget that? Festive Berries. I forgot about her little button here. How did I do that? Goodness gracious. It's funny how you kind of take a step back and you can see things a little more clearly after a little while. Put a little bit of the Festive Berries on there. I'm going to let that dry a bit. This is still feeling a little bit wet. All right. Just kind of blow on it maybe. I'm going to grab now a color called Stormy Sky. In some of these areas, I just want to brighten it up. Stormy Sky is a little bit brighter than the Weathered Wood. And I'm going to soften that edge just a little bit with water. There we go. Up underneath here a bit. There we go. Just brightens it up a bit. There we go. Blend that out. I'm going to come up under here a bit. Some of that brighter blue. Stormy Sky, it's an interesting color. Weathered Wood actually seems more like a stormy sky to me because it has so much gray in it. And this Stormy Sky is just a little bit brighter, and I think it kind of allows it to look a little more like a sunnier day instead of a stormy sky. So just brighten up that blue a tiny little bit. Enhance it around her a little bit. Soften it. Pull the color out and away. There we go. Really adds a kind of a little bit of a glow to the image. Do a little bit underneath here. I don't like putting this around the face. I mean, I've got the color there, but I don't make it real strong. I like to leave it a little bit whiter around the face. And I honestly can't even explain why. Okay, there we go. Now, while that dries a little bit, well, actually I'm going to add a tiny bit here. But while those areas dry a little bit, one thing I haven't done yet is really grounded this image much. And the artist has given us these two areas here where we've got grass, but I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to kind of add my own blades of grass, so to speak. So I've got my shabby shutters, and this is what I'm doing. I'm literally just coming up with blades of grass. I'm just putting lines. Shabby shutters is not going to show up very much, but I want it to look like she's kind of walking through, you know, the field a little bit. There's some, you know, some grass underneath her. Go a little bit shorter around that puppy. Okay, and just kind of throw these in. There's no rhyme or reason. Maybe in a couple of areas there's some longer blades that she's gone through. Then I'm going to grab my peeled paint, and I'm going to do the same with that. This is darker, so don't do quite as much. We just want a hint of this. Okay. Keep them low, keep them short around her a bit. All right. There's some longer ones out in some other areas. But I'm going to keep them a little bit shorter around the puppy and around her feet. Okay. But you got to remember, she was out in the field picking these flowers. Okay. I'm going to come in, believe it or not, with a little bit of the antique linen. Do the same, just for a little dimension. Yeah, it's a beige. It's not going to show up a lot. You may not even notice it's there, but it is. And they're going to look really faint. I'm also going to do a little bit of scribbling around at the bottom here, just for a little dimension. I'm going to come in with a tiny bit of water on that at the bottom, just to kind of blend that in and give a base to this picture. You got to remember, we are going to be cutting this picture out. Well, not cutting it out completely, but we'll be cutting around it in a little square. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to go back to my pumice stone, and with my brush tip, I'm going to come in close. Again, jagged around my image. I just want to deepen that shadow a bit around her. There we go. Up underneath here just a little bit. By adding these little shadows in here, it kind of pulls the image away from the paper a little bit, if that makes sense. So it doesn't look so flat. And just blend that out a little bit. Move that around. Sorry if you just heard my stomach growl. Goodness gracious. There we go. Let's add a little bit here. There we go. There we go. It's coming to life. Add a little bit right around the rim there. Maybe a little bit under her chin. And outline these just a little bit. The leaves, add some dark shadow in there. Maybe a little around this puppy. just for depth. I'm not adding a lot, just a little bit. I'll tell you, there are times when I'm working on things and I think, boy, oh boy, I could work on it for hours. Because you step away from it for a moment, you're working on a different area or something, and all of a sudden you realize, you know, I could enhance that area just a little bit more. There's sometimes when I'll step away from an image for a day, and I'll come back to it and start adding more things. Because you kind of look at it with new eyes, and you realize what else you can do. Deepen this under her hat a bit, where her hair is. Enhance some of these twists and turns of her braid. This again is, I'm only working with pumice stone right now. Alright. There she is. Adding a little pumice stone just at the bottom, just visually to show you where the ground is. Deepen that a bit, but that is really it. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing this for you. I hope you will come back and enjoy some more videos with us. Thank you.